Okay, I guess we can slowly start this presentation. So my name is Marek Ziemak, and I'm a senior producer at 11-Bit Studios. Maybe you know this company because lately we've released This War of Mine. Before, we've been credited for creating the Anomaly series as well. We're an indie developer from Poland, but we're also doing a bit of publishing right now with our 11-Bit Launchpad program. And we also own our small digital distribution platform, which is called Games Republic. So first of all, I would like to say, well, thank you for being here on this lecture. And second of all, I would like to thank all the organizers for inviting me here, because it's my second time in QUO VADIS. I was here last year. I really enjoy it. Well, I like the atmosphere. It's my second time in Berlin, but I really like the city. I like walking around. I like the climate somehow. To be honest, well, we're from Warsaw, and I feel here a bit like at home, maybe because of a post-Soviet architecture. Well, it suits my needs, definitely. So today, I'll talk about emotional and empathy games, such as This War of Mine. As I'm a producer, this lecture will not focus only on a specific area like game design, psychology, marketing, or storytelling. And during this presentation, I'll be using chunks of information from all of these fields just to give you a high-level concept or overview of the subject. And finally, maybe share a few personal thoughts of what I think about emotional gaming and some marketing trends that might be affecting the popularity of, well, let's call it a genre. So what are the takeaways? Well, hopefully after this presentation, you know what empathy games or emotional games are. If not, at least you know what I think emotional games are. Well, you also might be aware of some of the marketing or social trends that might be affecting sales of these types of games and their popularity in the future. And we end up this session with a Q&A. I can't really promise I know all the answers, but I'm hoping, or I'm looking forward to chatting with you about these kinds of games. Okay, so part one. When I was first starting or planning the content of this presentation, I was thinking about jumping straight to conclusions, so straight to the marketing trends that we have in the second part of this presentation. I was somehow sure that, well, this subject is pretty popular and that we all share the same understanding of what emotional or empathy games are. This was until I started talking to my game dev friends. And the problem also got really visible once I started looking for materials in the web. I soon realized that we don't have, well, a definition of an emotional game. We all somehow feel it, but different people give different examples. And it would be extremely hard to talk about, well, a subject that's not, well, established somehow, or each of us would understand it in a different way. To be honest, well, I don't think crafting a precise definition of an emotional game is somehow possible. I think it would be very challenging. Look what's happening with a definition of a game. Like, since decades, we're struggling to craft one precise definition of what a game is, and we're not quite there yet. So I guess adding the emotional component doesn't necessarily get us any closer. But anyway, that's why I decided to spend a large part of this presentation on describing what I believe emotional games are. And to do this, I want to show you my way of thinking and how I approach the problem. And I want to introduce you to a series of concepts from different fields I'm somehow using to craft this my own definition of emotional game. So, well, as I said, these concepts will be pretty basic, taken from different disciplines, different fields. I'll start with a bit of a film theory, because I find this one of those particular theories extremely, extremely important also for us. So in a book called Moving Pictures, A New Theory of Film Genres, Feelings, and Cognition, a guy named Torben Grodal, he presents this theory of how movies affect viewers. But I think this theory is also very interesting for us game developers and players. So what Grodal believes is that people are constantly building those mental models in their head based on a surrounding world. So whenever we are observing other people, we're somehow instantly imagining what their goals are, what their wishes are. We're somehow intuitively thinking of how would we be reacting if we've been walking in their shoes, and how would this experience affect us? It's like having a type of a laboratory inside of our heads that's constantly running simulations based on the input that it is given. And of course, this input can come from many different sources. Well, it turns out that these mental models are not only built whenever we are observing like real life, what's happening around us, but also whenever we are using our imagination, when we are watching a movie, reading a book, listening to a story, for example. And this is all somehow happening thanks to our ability of abstract thinking, of thinking about the absent, totally imaginary thing. So even a very simple video game, once we identify the actant usually, and this actant is in most cases represented by a character, we automatically run our cognitive procedures and we start to somehow simulate his position. We start using our empathy to think of what he is really feeling. So we start training his experience and trying to learn more about him and his situation, especially if this situation is somehow important or interesting to us. The same, of course, goes for animals or monsters or people we see in games, anything that's anthropomorphic. And this is something common to all, different mediums. But what's really interesting is that in games are the only single media where this actant is absolutely not obligatory. And it can be substituted by player as well. So there's no interesting film or a book, for example, without a strong character in the middle of it. But games such as Tetris can still be very interesting for us. They can be emotional, they can be challenging, they can somehow educate us in our skills. So in games in particular, whenever we lock the actant, we somehow instantly jump into the driver's seat, into the driver's position. We're like becoming the actant. We start obeying the rules of the game, and we're trying to overcome the difficulties that the game throws our way. We start to analyze, ourselves in a system that's being defined around us. It's like having the obstacles that we see and some simple mechanisms to overcome these obstacles. It's like enough for us to create a drama in our head and to deliver some satisfaction somehow. Now, the situations that we experience in whether it's going to be games or films or books, of course, they might not be real, and we are aware of this. We know we're not Mario, we know we're not, any other film character. But on the other hand, the emotions that these sources of media evoke, they're absolutely real. So sometimes they're very strong. I'm sure, if you play games or if you watch movies, I'm sure you experience this from time to time. You're like sitting in front of your computer, and suddenly you start laughing, or suddenly you start shaking because you're so afraid of what's happening inside of this world. Now, it doesn't help you that you say, come on, calm down, this is just a game, this is just a game. You understand that this is just a game, but you run a simulation on top of that, and the emotions that you have inside of you are very real. So basically, games are a kind of a test sites for our experience. They're like environments to run simulations, to deliver us some feelings and to deliver us new experiences. So the obstacles, they're kind of obstacles we enjoy to overcome, and we drain satisfaction out of doing so. Now I would like us to think a little bit of why is this actually happening? Why is playing games in a way fun? Why is it delivering us this kind of a pleasure? And I think we can find the answer in a book created by Ralph Koster, where he says that fun from games arises out of mastery. It arises out of comprehension. It is the act of solving puzzles that makes games fun. Now, I won't focus on any psychological details right here, because obviously I'm not a psychologist, I'm a producer. But in a very basic form, every time we pass a puzzle that somehow, well, is meaningful for us, or at least our brain thinks it's meaningful, we're getting this, well, dopamine shot, and we feel a little bit satisfied. Why are we being satisfied when playing games? Well, learning and experiencing is essential to our survival. So we believe that the smarter we get, the more agile we get, probably the longer we live, the more successful we will be in our life. So our bodies are basically encouraging us to develop these skills. That's why we're getting this pleasure when learning something, or when at least our brain thinks we're learning something. This of course, isn't something exclusive to video games, obviously. If you look at small children running around and playing, real-life games, they'll be very happy usually. I remember I loved playing hide and seek, building castles, imagining I'm a knight, Superman, Transformer, whatever. This was all very fun. Now, because it was fun, probably, based on the theory of Koster, I was learning something. So what was it that I was learning back there? What kind of a experience I was grinding as a small child running around with a gun or with, a sword, for example? Now, if we take a closer look, we probably realized, we tried to look for a theme, and we realized that all these games are based on hunting, escaping, hiding from predators. They're basically about building social status, or maybe outsmarting our enemies, climbing the top of the food chain at the best. So these games are somehow, in most cases, training our basic skills. They're using our most simple instincts, I think, like the fear of death, fear of starvation, losing a social position, becoming an alpha male, protecting youngsters. In a way, they're teaching us to become better predators, perhaps. This is even more visible if you look at small animals playing. I'm sure you've seen a small cat, playing with a bouncing ball, and it's absolutely cute, it's fun, and this animal is, running around doing crazy stuff. It's really nice. But in fact, he's really training his hunting skills. And this is really visible once you see the same very cat playing with a mouse that's alive. He uses the same tricks, except the situation isn't as fun anymore. But he learned how to actually solve this kind of problem of something escaping from him. So there was a time, of course, in mankind history where those reptile skills were very useful. They were basically essential to our survival. And perhaps this is why we developed this, intense need for training these skills since the very, very beginning, since our childhood. And of course, because they became so, popular, just a natural part of us as a humanity, as our civilization was developing, as it was evolving, as well as our culture, these primitive games, they often became a base of nowadays sports, and later on, video games as well. So believe me or not, but throwing a spear back in the days was something more than just an Olympic competition, obviously. But now it changed. We don't use that too often. So also because we somehow naturally know how to react in some of those very basic situations, games that are built upon those reptile skills are very easy to understand. We quickly are sucked in. It's pretty obvious. So once you understand the controls in a game like this, you exactly know what to do. So there's no need, for example, to explain what to do in Doom once you know how to shoot or move around. You have a gun, there's a guy that looks like a monster coming your way, and you rapidly know that you have to kill or get killed, or maybe run away in the best case scenario. Now, Space Invaders are another great example. It was enough to create a very simple spaceship and few pixely things coming your way, And you as a player, you believe that these things are there to destroy you. So you start fighting for your life. People were actually getting very emotional while you're playing Space Invaders. They believed somehow they're fighting for their survival. So a few pixels were enough to somehow take us back to those Stone Age times. Now, the kind of a problem or challenge is that we don't really use those shooting, hunting, and killing skills in our everyday lives now. They're not as worthy as there used to be. Of course, there are some situations where we are using our reflex, like, for example, when we're about to have a car accident. This is very useful back then. But there's also all this aggression in many games, and these elements are somehow perceived as more negative. So do games that are built upon those reptile simple skills totally useless? Now, my theory would be that they're not, because they might not be the driving force behind, our education system, behind our building our social structures or diplomacy, but they offer us a way of escaping reality. They often also offer us a way of training our reflex, spatial orientation, strategic thinking. But I believe escapism is the biggest plus of these parts of games. Now, after all day of solving complex problems, dealing with people, analyzing dozens of different parameters, we just simply want to forget about everyday lives. We just want to sit down and relax for a moment. We want to focus on the problem that is well understood. So, for example, we enjoy playing, a simple game about killing for a moment in the evening, because this is such a well understood and natural environment somehow. You suddenly know what to do. You have to kill or get killed. This is somehow relaxing. You understand what's the purpose of your life, in comparison to your everyday tasks that are more and more complex. But of course, games aren't only about escapism. Now, because they are a very complex medium, they can become, I believe, much more than simulators for our primal instincts. So using the tools such as gameplay, but also tools defined by other media, dialogues, movies, and mixing them with, the unique interactivity that games allow us to have, we have a potential of becoming what I think it might be a most advanced emotional simulation ever. So simulations that will allow us to feel something that's really sophisticated, higher emotions, not only our basic instincts. Simulations that will somehow increase our understanding of others and the world surrounding us, not only understand how to better kill or survive in a critical situation. So I think that games, through their complexity, they allow us to, explore, discover, cry, love, laugh, you name it. They also, as the omni medium, they allow us to feel satisfaction, regret, or mercy because of what we did. Now, besides escapism and this kind of isolation I was talking about previously, these games often now are offering us catharsis, something that has been with us since the times of the ancient theater. Now, just like books or just like movies, this catharsis, it somehow can be reached thanks to the stories that the game is built upon us. And as we all probably know, stories are, the best way of transferring human experience. Stories are somehow with us and with our civilization since the very, very first days we learned how to speak or we learned how to draw. This is, something extremely, extremely important. So games, just like books or films, but I think with a greatly increased power, can offer us new perspectives. They often offer us new experiences that we would never have in our real lives. So if we understand that our wisdom as people, it comes from the experiences that we survive, we will probably start understanding that games can be the ultimate medium delivering this kind of experience that's somehow developing us internally. What I really think attracts us to games, or many players, are the same elements that are attracting humanity to stories. This is one of the quotes I would like to share with you. It's been created by Joseph Campbell. He said when he was asked why people like stories so much, he said, "I think that what we are seeking is an experience of being alive so that we can feel the rapture being alive." Now, I think games can also make you feel this rapture. This is why it's high time to, stop thinking about games only as systems training our reflex, training our spatial orientation, for example, and start thinking about them as a means of training our imagination, allowing us to create, new context, which will, as a result, allow us to discover and develop new knowledge inside of us. To start treating them as art, basically, because this was a definition of art. So I believe that once we start creating games also as art, our goals will become somehow similar to the ones that, for example, the cinema or the movie industry has. When I was preparing to this presentation, I was looking for reasons why people are watching emotional films, because after all, this is a partially presentation about emotional games. I found few of those reasons on a website called Cracking Jars, and I, find them very useful. I think these are the same reasons why people are also playing some of the games that somehow make us feel more. Now, what are those reasons? First of all, people watch emotional films and probably play emotional games to expand their emotional bandwidth, to feel the sensation that we rarely experience in our normal lives. Another reason is reconnecting to our higher selves, to be reminded that we are humans and what are we capable of, both in terms of good and in terms of evil. But also, we're watching these movies to be reminded that we're not alone, to realize that we're not the only ones, wrestling with life's ills. So basically, life in many situations is pretty tough. We all have our fears, we have our dramas, we have, allies and enemies. We're trying to get a good job, raise a kid, form a family, be understood, maybe socially accepted. This isn't something we always know to do. Sometimes we feel, overwhelmed. Sometimes we fear of the unknown. Sometimes we don't have enough experience to solve some kind of a complex situation. Now, I believe that games, just like any form of art, but with an increased power and power of educating people, they're there to change our perspective, to help us understand the world. So games that succeed in somehow making us smarter, I believe, are the ones that should be called emotional, also empathy, if they're increasing our empathy. And I think these are the games that should be really called works of art. So now, quickly, just to sum up what I believe emotional games are. In my opinion, emotional games are meaningful games. Those are the games that are created for the purpose of educating, entertaining, informing, simulating situations, but in a way that leaves us somehow emotionally, more advanced, more mature. Someone said some time ago that great stories move beyond spectacle by crafting character, plot, and theme in such a way that those concepts bounce meaningfully out of each other. They grant audience deeper insight into the world around them. Now, one day, or I think this is already a moment, I can say that these emotional games move beyond spectacle. And by crafting gameplay, character, plot, and theme in such a way that these concepts bounce meaningfully out of each other, they grant a player a deeper insight into the world around them. I believe games are the ultimate medium for carrying human experience, especially emotional games. So that would be my definition of this subject. Now, before we move on, there's one thing I would like to share with you. This is a letter that we, after creating This War of Mine, I'm not sure if you familiar with the concept. How many of you have played This War of Mine or heard about the game? Okay, quite few. Basically, this is a war about civilians trapped in a besieged city. This is a game that's supposed to be somehow emotional. Now, this is a letter we received from one of the players. I'll read it in an original version. I started playing This War of Mine a few days ago, maybe a week ago, and I obviously don't need to tell you how much of an impression it makes given you made it. But I wanted to explain something about how I was sitting down on my sofa in my family's home, and I've been playing the game for hours non-stop, as is the habit when you find a new game that makes such an impression. And my nephew was around. He's only 4 years old, and he sat next to me and asked me what I was doing. I said that I was playing a game, and he asked for more details. And in his short life, a large number of his toys have been toy guns. A large number of the things that he's watched via media influence would have this violent context in one way or another. And he, like many other children his age, has developed something of a fixation with guns, with violence, with death, and would make the kind of comments related to that you hope he would lack an awareness of, and they would make you worry about his future views and impressions. He was asking what was happening, and rather than disregarding his comments or his inquisitiveness, I tried to explain the very basic context of what can happen to ordinary people when in situations involving violence, war, and related struggles. And without exposing him to any of the explicit violent moments of what can happen in your game, he grasped from what I was saying and explaining, and the mood of what was being shown, something that acted and acts as a counterpoint to the bombardment of imaginary and views that he and other children are exposed to otherwise. He saw how it was sad. He saw how these kind of things can happen to people and how they're instantly wrong. We had a really good discussion between us, and hopefully that will act for him as a counterpoint to the violent ideas he will be exposed to continually from the culture in which he lives in. Other influences might have spurred this conversation at some point anyway, but I want to thank you for doing that, what you do and what you did, and creating something provocative in the most basal sense. So I think this person basically is also describing our game as a game that became emotional for him and his nephew, a game that allowed them to learn something about the world surrounding them and about some situation people might be inside. Because it involved people, I think this game, This War of Mine, could also be called an empathy game, because I hope it changed the way they perceive reality, at least for a bit. Okay, so this finishes the first big introduction part of this presentation. Now quickly just to the marketing trends that I think will somehow be shaping our reality and maybe affecting how popular or unpopular emotional and empathy games are. I often hear people who say that it's high time for games, to evolve, to become mature and stop being childish. I'm also a big fan of games evolving in reality, but I do not agree that, games about escapism should totally be forgotten. It's true that emotional games, like the ones we're talking about, are bringing new value, and then they can somehow be useful socially. But on the other hand, after solving all the struggles of our everyday lives, we're not willing to spend every evening solving a huge load of emotional riddles. So no matter how intelligent, how emotional we are, I believe we all have these evenings when we just want to relax, go for a walk, watch something stupid in the TV, browse through your Facebook wall, or maybe relax with a game that's purely, offering you escapism. This is why I think these games will always be somehow popular. Just like not every book or not every film is about empathy or about emotions. Some of them are just offering you a way of escaping your everyday life. Now, I also believe that the same people who will enjoy empathy and emotional games from time to time will be enjoying games that offer escapism. I even confirmed this somehow. There's webpage called Steam Spy, steamspy.com. It's run by one of my friends, Sergey from Ukraine. It's a great website, by the way, if you don't know it. It has a lot of data from Steam. Now, I was checking what other games do players who own This War of Mine, Gone Home, To the Moon, Papers, Please, or Violent Hearts, so the games that I perceive as emotional, what other games do they own? And it turns out that these players also enjoy Terraria, Borderlands, Faster Than Light, Magicka, Bioshock, and many others. Of course, these are great games, but it turns out that they're not only playing, these emotionally loaded productions. From time to time, they just want to have some fun and relax and escape. And there are these evenings when they're looking for those more emotionally intense productions. Another trend that I think is somehow important for us is games will have to evolve because they start becoming repetitive. Now, games aren't a very fresh hobby. We've been playing games since 50 years right now. So it's high time for some people to get bored. We're slowly getting bored with the repetitive content, mechanisms, strategies, patterns. This is also something that Ralph Koster in A Theory of Fun mentions. He said that, I find myself unable to relate to some of the games that everyone tells me I should be playing. I just can't move the mouse as fast as I used to. He also later on describes that he doesn't have, the motivation to learn these skills anymore because these games are somehow repetitive. Now, we have to understand that, well, if we maybe start this way. There's a report created by Entertainment Software Association in 2014 describing the US market. And if we analyze this report, we'll learn that the average American player, adult American player, is playing games since like 16 years. The average for males are 18 years and for females 13 years. So again, it's high time to start being, bored if you're fed constantly with the same content. I feel exactly the same way. It's just, I want to say what Tyler Durden said in Fight Club, that many games seem to be a copy of a copy of a copy. And I get rapidly bored once I see the template behind that. And I have these moments, these evenings, when I love playing games. I really like playing games. So there's a time when I want to experience something fresh, something new. It's just that there aren't so many games in the market that are offering me something totally refreshing. I'm also like playing escapist games from time to time, but I think there's more and more people like me who are willing to experiment with something totally new. Maybe this is explaining why the indie genre is getting more popular, and I think this will be the driving force of emotional games as well, because they're delivering more value, something more unique. Now, of course, another trend that I think will make emotional games a little bit more popular is that games are not only for hardcore players anymore. So thanks to the mobile revolution, thanks to the evolving of digital distribution platforms, games are now accessible to almost everyone. We all own a gaming device. If you have a phone, if you have a tablet, you basically have hardware that allows you to play games. Because of this, but also because of Facebook and all the social revolution, there's a huge wave of new players joining us. Now, right now, maybe this wave is somehow stuck. Well, not stuck, but they're enjoying it. But they're mostly focused on social games or casual games, trivia games, mobile but simpler games. But I think that they're educating. I think that those are their first, approaches. They're experiencing games. They're learning how to control stuff. They're learning how to download games. And I think that in the future, a huge part of these players will actually join the players that we call hardcore, mid-core, a bit more mature. But these will be the people who, well, they weren't playing games since their very, very childhood. Those will be the people that, started experiencing games later on when they were already mature. So I think that a part of these players who will actually be educated and experienced more and move on from those simple games to more mature games will want to experience the same content in games as they want to experience, for example, in movies. Now, what is it that makes people watch emotional movies or movies at all? What is it that makes them go to cinemas or buy DVDs? Now, if we analyze one of the reports created by European Union, we know that few people are watching movies. 96% when asked why do they watch movies, they say to entertain oneself and to have fun. Now, this is something we're obviously pretty good at delivering. Games also entertain people. 96% again answers that they watch movies to spend some nice time with family and friends. This is also something that games can offer. Of course, you have multiplayer modes, hot seats, party games. This all brings us more together. But also 90% of the people who watch films say that they want to watch films to discover and learn about people and culture. Now, I think this is the element that we're somehow still missing in games. There's more and more games being created about people and culture. But I think there's a big niche and a big need in the market that's still not being satisfied, of people who are willing to learn about cultures, willing to learn about something different. This is another trend, which is, I think, very important, is that more and more women are making it to the gaming industry. I'm not sure if you know, but 48% of US gamers are women. And women that are 18 or older represent a much bigger portion of the whole gaming community of America than boys that are 18 and younger. Because these women, 18 and older, they're over 36% of the whole community, while boys that are 18 and younger are only 17% of this community. Why do I think this is important for this trend? Because it's confirmed in many papers, but also in a theory fund created by Ralph Koster, that female players would gravitate toward games with simpler abstract systems, less spatial reasoning, and more emphasis on interpersonal relationship, narrative, and empathy. Now, this was a quote from this book. This is why I believe the more women will join the gaming industry, and the more women will join particular segments of the market, they'll be the ones behind, or they'll be creating the driving force for games to change. Of course, this is again something that's confirmed since a long time in the movie industry, for example. It is confirmed that women are more interested in community and restoration and complex objectives than male viewers, for example, and that boys are more interested in films dealing with survival, revenge, and quest. Now, there are many statistics like this if you try to analyze the movie industry, and I believe it works in it probably works a similar way back in the gaming community. Now, of course, another trend, social trend that's affecting or driving the change of game industry is that gamers are getting older. The average age of an American gamer is 31. And as we all know, mature people are at least sometimes wiser. They're more experienced. They're less naive in most cases. And they're a bit more picky in terms of choosing their entertainment because they basically have less time. It's also confirmed in few different analyses, but also in a theory fan again, that as males age, you'd expect them to slowly shift over to playstyles similar to those of women. So as players will get older, they'll be slowly changing the games they would like to see on the market. I will not go into details right now because we're running low on time, but this is obviously, of course, also confirmed since a long time in the movie industry. Younger children prefer high-budget movies, where mature people prefer more complex movies about emotions, about life, that doesn't have such a simple plot, for example. And I think the last big trend that will be forcing games to evolve and possibly making emotional games more popular is that there's a huge demand for games to evolve. And I think everyone's interested, because as gamers, we will be satisfied if there are games which are very emotional or very mature, because then if someone tells us, hey, you have a stupid hobby, you're playing childish game, we say, no, you're not right. Games are a work of art. This is my shield. Look, there's a game like this, and they're very serious. So it's not a stupid hobby. This is why gamers would like at least some games to evolve. The same happens with game developers. We have enough of, working childish stuff. We want to be perceived as someone who's really creating, or people who are really creating art, something very meaningful. This is why we will be driving the development of emotional games or serious games, I think. Also, game journalists will obviously gain if games become more serious and more artsy, because their prestige will increase. I think governments will also benefit from this trend, because it's going to be easier to support the gaming community, because games won't be a stupid, crazy, childish thing, but they'll be somehow socially beneficial as well. And of course, at the end, maybe our whole society will benefit, because people will start experiencing and learning more based on games. So hopefully they'll be tweaking and changing their lives a bit based on what they experience and what they see in games. And this might be somehow valuable, I hope. Okay, this was a lot of talking, but it's the end. I hope at least somehow you've enjoyed it. Thank you. Again, my name was Marek Ziemak. If you would like to contact me, this is my email address. I work at 11bitstudios.com, but we also have this publishing thing that I work at. I'm a producer back there. It's called 11-bit Lunchpod. So if you have an interesting game on your mind, you're looking for a publisher or financing, drop me an email. Here's my contact.